Has Senegal found stability? A bout of widespread violence in one of Africa's most stable democracies left the world on alert last year. But with an election now complete and the opposition taking power in a peaceful transition, we ask if Senegal is fully back on track. I'm Andrea Sanke, and today's newsmaker is Senegal. Bassirou Diomaye Faye is set to become not just the youngest leader in Senegal, but in Africa. It's a welcome development in the West African nation after violence there shocked the world just 9 months ago. The turmoil started with President Macky Sall, who was on the verge of completing his second term, refusing to say whether he would unconstitutionally run for a third. At the same time, leading opposition figure Ousmane Sonko was jailed on charges of corrupting the youth. In the end, 16 people died, and the scenes of violence and instability left the region and the world wondering if Senegal would find peace again. Here's a look.
A quick transition from behind bars to the seat of power in Senegal. Bassirou Diomaye Faye was jailed last year after he was charged with defamation for criticizing the government on Facebook. But he was released because of an amnesty law 10 days before Senegalese people elected him president on March 25th. Faye was backed by popular opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, who had been barred from running because of a prior conviction. 44-year-old Faye is set to officially assume office on April the 2nd as the youngest president ever in Senegal.
The Senegalese people have chosen to break with the past, to give substance to the immense hopes raised by our vision of society. I hope that our vision of society has given substance to their aspirations. I pledge to govern with humility and transparency, and to fight corruption at all levels. I pledge to devote myself fully to rebuilding our institutions and strengthening the foundations of our way of life together.
His victory comes after a bout of political turmoil and unrest.
To be honest, we vote for Faye out of hope. You have to look at the population. There is a hope that brings us all together. We have a lot of expectations of him.
The vote was a blow to the outgoing President Macky Sall. He had tried to delay the election and stay in power beyond his mandate, and his choice of successor, Amadou Ba, suffered as a result. In a gesture of reconciliation, Faye thanked Macky Sall for standing aside and promised to govern with humility.
I would like to say to the international community and our bilateral and multilateral partners that Senegal will always hold its ground and remain a friendly country and a reliable ally to any.
Faye has vowed to tackle corruption and exploit the country's natural resources. He wants to take greater control over the natural resources such as fishing rights, renegotiate Senegal's oil and gas contracts, and possibly introduce a new currency. But with mass youth unemployment and severe inequality plaguing the nation, his administration wants to prioritize job creation, improve public education, and revitalize the agricultural sector. Faye's win is clearly a victory for democracy, but has it raised the expectations of Senegal's young electorate too high?
So how much can Faye's new government achieve, and will Senegal be able to stave off any return to violence with expectations so high? Well, joining me now to debate that are, from Dakar, Mayecor Sar, a former Senegalese government advisor and founder of the Africa 2050 think tank. From Atlanta is Bamba Ndiaye, an assistant professor of African studies at Emory University and host of the Africanist podcast. And also from the Senegalese capital is Ousmane Sene, director of the West African Research Center. Thanks all so much for being with me. You know, casting our minds back then to 9 months ago, Mayecor, I'll start with you. Did you think Senegal would be seeing what it's seeing today? You know, a young newcomer chosen in a peaceful election, taking the reins of power in a very peaceful transition.
So I think, yeah, as you took us back a couple of months ago, I don't think Senegal has ever been off track. I think Senegal is on track. We've been here before in 68, 88, 93, 2000, 2012. Senegal institutions are strong. They sometimes bend, but they do not break. In fact, it actually helps these crises help to reinforce our democratic model. And I should also add that Senegal is not just about institution, it's a whole system. You have intellectuals and academics that are usually very prompt in thinking, rethinking the societal and governance model. You have the clergy in Senegal that usually serve as social moderators, both big brotherhoods, the Muslims and the Tijans are very good at it, as well as the Catholic Church. And you have a very, very strong civil society, keeping politicians honest. All these actors played a part making sure, this crisis did not tilt Senegal over the edge.
Okay, let me ask Bamba if you feel the same, because, from the outside, the question is still that it got to that point. And Mayecor can say, well, yes, it's happened before, but it happened many decades before in a different context. So it was quite shocking that Senegal did descend into what we saw 9 months ago. But did you expect it to get to where it is today with this peaceful return to its democracy?
I did, for many reasons. And as Mayecor mentioned, we have mechanisms in place that have in the past or historically helped resolve crises around the table. But what is shocking is the fact that we have not, in my opinion, witnessed this level of political violence, but also this level of repression that the outgoing regime exercised on the Senegalese people and the opposition. But also shocking because we have not seen such a constitutional coup that happened with President Sall postponing the presidential campaign election 10 hours before the start of the presidential campaign. And I think the sum of all of that, in addition to some of the injustices we have seen during the advance of the second term of President Sall, Senegalese people were ready for change. And I am not surprised that the opposition made it to power, although Bassirou Diomaye Faye being in prison 10 days before his election, that in itself is also unprecedented.
Right, and it is pretty impressive. But if we look back, quickly, Bamba, I'll stick with you. Because all of that happened, what was that? Was it, I'll even say maybe a moment of madness for Macky Sall, thinking somehow he could extend his term? I mean, all he really had to say, and I spoke to many analysts about this, was that he would not run for an unconstitutional third term. He just wouldn't say it.
Yeah, and I think that cost his candidate the election because they didn't have enough time to prepare a viable candidate to replace him. And he knew, I think, all the constitutionalists and political analysts of good faith knew that he was not allowed. He could not run for a third term. It was unconstitutional. Yet he kept, he was quite silent about that. And many of the violence we witnessed and the death toll could have been avoided if he had said earlier that he was not running for a third term. And I agree with you on that. But regardless, he tried to, for lack of better term, sabotage the democratic process. And fortunately, the Senegalese people were woke enough to prevent that from happening by voting massively against the outgoing regime.
So, Ousmane, I mean, this is Is to see Senegal today compared to what we saw 9 months ago, it truly is an impressive state then. And what do you think it's primarily due to then? The institutions, the people, the final rationale of Macky Sall that he cannot put Senegalese democratic institutions to the test like that, especially up against people who are very much involved in their democratic process?
Yeah, I think basically what was at stake was a certain sense of wisdom and responsibility. There is a limit to what you can do, and you should be aware of what you cannot do. Those things are important to understand the way in which things unfolded to the end. I would be maybe more lenient with perhaps what was called the Macky Sall's attempt to sabotage democracy and the final stage, because I don't see what advantage Macky Sall could possibly have trying to buy everything right at the end. You led this country for 2 terms. There were many achievements to your credit, and the entire nation was already applauding and just parading you as a good leader. I think if you are in your right sense, reason would dictate that you try to take people things to their best end. But trying to have things in the process would be absolutely silly. That's why I've always had a kind of different reading of the situation.
Okay.
And I think all this wisdom, look at the way in which Bassirou Diomaye Faye and even Ousmane Sonko behaved during the election and after when we got the result. I think their speech or their discourse has changed in tone. It is a discourse which accommodates President Sall and which seems to be opening a door for his outing in dignity. And I think, bottom line, this is very much like the way in which Senegalese people, Senegalese families, Senegalese communities operate. Don't reject, but try to get in as many people as possible.
Okay.
And this is what I see as, the end of this.
Understood. So let's move forward. Mayecor, I'll come back to you. I mean, there is a lot to deliver here. And this new president, he's known in Senegal as Diomaye, is probably going to have to anger some others in government to do what he's promised. Tell me, do you think if his lack of experience as a seasoned politician will help or hinder him in doing what he wants to do?
No, I don't think so. I think, obviously, I guess no one is ready to hold the presidency on day one. I think even the most seasoned politicians will tell you that. What I think is that he's a young politician. Senegal is a country where 75% of the people are younger than 35. So he's at the right age to govern and to understand the needs of those young people. So I think that's good. And so far the omens are good so far. I think first of all, one has to pay homage, for example, to Ousmane Sonko, who was himself barred from running, but still hit the campaign trail with a rarely seen fervor to elect his friend and mentee Bassirou Diomaye Faye. And but having said that, listen, both Bassirou Diomaye Faye, Ousmane Sonko, and all the leaders of the party have always said that they've designed a program where they brainstormed with over 1,400 people. 30 sectoral commissions were set up as part of that process. So they have rethought every aspect of Senegal socio-economic model, and I think that that's a good omen for the future.
Okay.
And,
but I mean, I was also asking, though, going forward, how he will have to get along with other parties in government. Is he ready to do what he needs to do politically, even if it angers others, including even Karim Wad's party, for example?
I mean, he will have to do so. The expectations are high. I mean, I think the lion's share of the votes came anyway from their party, right? I mean, all the other parties that joined later on helped seal the deal. But most, as we've seen in the local elections last year, you know, they were managed to almost force a coalition. Cohabitation, an unprecedented cohabitation, cohabitation with the government in power, and
Okay.
that was they will govern as they promised to. They've got their own project, and I think that will be the basis for governance.
Okay,
It may please some, it may please some, but
good to
that's
hear.
politics, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Bamba, do you agree there? And also, I want to pick up on one of the points that Mayecor had raised. I mean, did people, in your opinion, vote for Sonko or vote for Faye? And what does Sonko, I mean, I should say, what does Faye arguably owe Sonko going forward?
People voted for a project and against continuity, in my opinion. Sonko is certainly the architect behind the victory, but at the end of the day, it is the Senegalese people who voted for Diomaye Faye and the PASTEF project. I don't think Sonko, Bassirou owes anything to Sonko personally. But I expect a close collaboration between the two, since they are both of them co-founders of PASTEF and also worked very hard on the PASTEF project. Now, in terms of angering their allies and things like that, I don't think that is going to happen, because they made it clear. PASTEF, Sonko, Bassirou Diomaye Faye made it clear that there will be no quid pro quo. The Senegalese people are at the center of their project, and there is no you're going to vote for me or support me in exchange of positions within the government or the regime. I don't think we will see that happen. And yes, he's never held public office before, but also we should know that there is nowhere where being a president of a country is taught. As long as he surrounds himself with technocrats and people who are knowledgeable about the conduits of the state and government, I think he should be fine. And
do you think he'll do that?
Yes, that's what he promised, that's what they promised, that for instance, certain key positions within the government or administrations will not be now by appointment. People would submit their candidacy, and they will, analyze based on experience and knowledge. And I think that's a big break compared to what we are used to seeing, meaning positions that are politically motivated and putting people sometimes who have no experience in certain positions. I think all of that is going to end.
Okay. Ousmane, let me ask you, because this is such what is happening in Senegal and what happened in Senegal became such an international story. So tell us what you think, first of all, in the region, what this means for fellow African nations, especially in West Africa.
It means a lot, because under many circumstances and most cases, Senegal has always been some sort of model. I would not like to be too avuncular and say a model to be imitated, but it sounds like it. And also at the international level, Senegal stands up as the yardstick with which to measure the performances of the other countries. And this is exactly what I felt when the Senegalese president was being bitter about being attacked by the international media and international fora. But my conclusion was Senegal is a model. Whatever you can accept and bear with other countries, you cannot possibly accept with Senegal because Senegal stands taller than any other situation and models. So Senegal has got to perform very high from now on because many people, observers, were saying, well, you criticizing what's going on in neighboring countries. Now look at the situation in Senegal, particularly the day or that Saturday when President Sall decided that would be changing the dates of election and the ensuing demonstration. Other countries were saying, well, I mean, you have been criticizing us too much. Look at what's happening in Senegal. In actual fact, what they thought was happening in Senegal has nothing to do with what really and actually happened.
Okay.
Senegal still stands as a model in terms of democracy, as a model in terms of social and religious ethnic cohesion, as a model in what you call a nation. That
Okay.
is to say,
Understood.
united and having and having one project and leading to that project. This is what Senegal stands for.
Okay.
And I think,
It is indeed. Many do consider it a model for West Africa. But listen, we're down to our last few minutes, so let me come back to Mayecor and Bamba for the final question here. What about, with this new leadership, the relationship with France? We'd heard the opposition before talk a little bit about distancing itself from the former colonial power, as has been the talk in the rest of the region, not least dropping the CFA franc. Where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, I think again, first of all, I think the first signs are good. When the president-elect gave his first speech after being elected, you could see the reaction from the bonds pricing who went up, suggesting that investors are actually confident or have grown in confidence with the current regime being in place. You have also President Macron, who congratulated via Twitter Bassirou Diomaye Faye in Wolof, actually, which many can perceive as an outstretched hand from a country that was often, as you said, on the receiving end of the campaign rhetoric. You have also, I mean, you can argue that Faye's style of foreign policy will be very different to that of his predecessor, right? The way he's talking about the CFA franc, about the AES countries, the Sahel countries that seceded from ECOWAS a couple of months ago, the way he talks about them shows that he will be governed by ideology and by sovereignty, the sovereignty of Senegal, to try to be an influence within ECOWAS rather than what Macky Sall did, where he was trying to gather consensus within ECOWAS and take it to the world. So I think in that sense, France will have to adapt to that new style of government and that new vision.
Right.
But,
Bamba, let me get Bamba. We have one last minute. So Bamba, tell me if you're on the same page there as far as the relationship with France is concerned.
I think it's only fair that this new government seeks a redefinition of the relationship with France, because for over 50 years, Senegal's and Francophone Africa's relationship with France has been that of a subordination. And now we have new generations of young people who have legitimate demands to see that relationship change, including questioning the use of the CFA franc. The CFA franc, as many economists have shown, does not necessarily foster growth. And what Senegal needs, and Francophone Africa, the rest of the continent really is economic growth rather than price stability and things like that. And if that means championing the use of a different currency, why not? If that means championing the implementation of ECO, which is underway, I believe, why not? It's only fair to ask for a redefinition of the relationship with France and make it a win-win partnership.
Okay, will be interesting to see where that goes. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time, though, gentlemen, for this edition of the Newsmakers. So I'd like to thank all three of you really so much for being with us, and our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sanke. We'll see you next time.